everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to the Division 2. And today, I've got a breakdown and weapon spotlight on the brand new event item that we got with the Cherry Blossom event, that being the first Bloom assault rifle. I've seen a lot of talk about this weapon across the community, some people saying that it is a fantastic new item to use in the endgame, others somewhat doubting its novelty and its unique talent. So I just kind of want to cut through it all in this video, let you know how it works, let you know what I think, what some of my build recommendations would be. So we'll get straight to it. If you enjoyed this one, you want to see more from me on the Division 2 moving forward, then be sure to subscribe. A big shout out and thank you to our channel members. As always, your support keeps me here, keeps me going, making these videos, so thank you so much for everything that you do. But without further ado, let's jump in. Alright, to begin, it is usually important to answer the question first of how can we actually get this item. The first Bloom released with this current Cherry Blossom event, that is right now the only way you can get it for the next 2 weeks. We can assume, like other event items, that it will come back in rotation for future events, but if you want to get one for sure, it's most advised to do it now. We do have a full guide up on the event in case you need some of that information in terms of how to get keys, because you're going to need to come to the base right up here to the vendor where you can choose from a gear cache, and this cache specifically is what has a chance to drop the first Bloom, as well as a rare chance to get a prototype version of it. We're just going to be taking a look at the normal version in this video, but you can indeed get a prototype variant out of here. So if we crack one of these open, we will see what we get. Well, it's a vest, that's not going to be it, but you have a chance to get it from this. I believe it is one of the higher rolled items that you can get because they want to promote getting the new item out of the crate. So farm up some keys, open some caches, and hopefully you get one. Okay, so here is the first Bloom. We are continuing the trend of these event weapons getting their own unique skin and visuals, which I always love. So yeah, this is the base skin on the first Bloom. But if we take a look at the item itself, it reads, Cherry Blossoms are transient things, typically lasting 2 weeks or less. Your enemies will last a significantly shorter time. Now, if you couldn't tell, this is based off of the PDR archetype of assault rifle. Not maybe the most popular in terms of raw DPS, but not terrible either, and the talent will help us compensate for that. So the PDR by design does not come with a grip mod slot, so you are missing out on that. Otherwise, though, it has the same attribute rolls as we're used to. This is the unique part of the gun, though. This weapon comes with an all-new talent called Blossom Harvest, and it reads, amplifies weapon damage by 3.3% for each 10% combined armor and health the enemy has remaining. So, simply put, this weapon is going to be most effective against those high health, high armor enemies, because at maximum you're getting 33.3% amp damage, but that value will then ramp down the closer you get the enemy to 0 HP. And something kind of interesting to point out is that this doesn't quite calculate or work like other talents that we are used to. If we head into the shooting range really quickly, and I will set this target to a named, just so that we can see. Now, normally on a talent like Optimist or Strained, you would get the AR visual for the talent on the side of the gun, and then whatever enhanced damage value that talent offered you would be baked right into the damage number that you saw when you shot a target. What's interesting about the first Bloom and Blossom Harvest is that when you shoot any enemy, you'll see that there are actually 2 damage numbers. So the lower number and the larger of the two is the base weapon damage value. That is what the PDR would be dealing if it had no talent whatsoever. And then that top smaller number is what it is calculating for Blossom Harvest, which once again changes depending on how much HP and armor the enemy has. So it is a separate calculation, which comes into play with some other stuff that we'll talk about in a moment. But just in terms of you visualizing how much value you're getting out of the talent at any given moment, you'll see that right now it's like 46. Of course, that goes up on a crit. So 90,000 on a crit, right? But if we get the target lower down, okay, let's leave it about there. Now if we shoot and aim for a crit, it's only 16,000 because we're in that final little segment of the total armor and health, which means we're probably getting maybe 3.3, 6.6% amp damage. Now it's down to 3.3, and as we get to the very end, that bonus goes away completely, right? We're just down to base damage. So again, just in terms of talent tracking, you're not going to be looking on the side of the gun, but rather for that secondary damage value whenever you shoot, and it will be at its highest when a target is at their most amount of armor and HP. Alright, well now that you know how the weapon works, I wanted to quickly touch on one thing before we move on to general discussion around this item, and that is its synergy or potential lack thereof with two popular building options in the game, that being the Turmoil knee pads and the Negotiator's Dilemma gear set. Now, I wanted to bring this up because I've already seen lots of recommendations around the community of people saying, hey, you should run the first bloom with Turmoil or with Negotiators. And I had some of the exact same curiosities, right? The Blossom Harvest talent sounds like it would lend pretty well towards those. You target high armor, high health targets that then transfers that high damage to lesser enemies that would die off quicker. However, upon my testing of these two things, I'm not sure that they actually work with the first bloom. Now, I'll put it out there, this could be a huge small brain moment from me. Normally, I leave these kind of in-depth calculations and formulas to those in the community who are much smarter than myself. So if I'm somehow wrong on this, I will absolutely pin anybody's comment that has good evidence and an explanation proving me otherwise. But from what I can tell, it looks like because Blossom Harvest is calculated differently than a lot of talents that we're used to, that is in turn prohibiting it working with Turmoil and Negotiators in the ways that you would expect. So if we look at these examples here, when testing with the Turmoil, you'll see that each shot nets me 3 damage numbers. First, you then have the base damage of the weapon, which is halved because of Turmoil. That value is then replicated and split to another target, but then you'll see that the amped Blossom Harvest amount only appears once, meaning, again, as far as I can tell, the actual bonus damage you're getting from the talent is only applying to the one first target that you shoot. The same thing here on Negotiators. Now, the number of damage numbers you will see depends on the number of targets that you have marked in any given time, but in these examples, you'll see at the bottom of that list there, I have the base damage number. Above that, there are then slightly higher numbers than the base for the 112% bonus I'm getting from the Negotiator's backpack. Those numbers are getting shared out to the marked targets, but once again, then you're only seeing a singular instance of the Blossom Harvest amped value. So again, unless there is some way to track that damage being added that's not visible in damage numbers, my testing so far leaves me skeptical that these two items work with the first bloom. Again, though, as I said, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments. It's certainly possible, but I just wanted to point those findings out. So now that we've covered that, let's get to the bottom line question. Is the first bloom any good? Well, the TLDW, if you don't want to keep watching, it is absolutely viable, right? It has an actual use in gameplay. It is not just another gimmicky event item like the Slayer or the Oak Carol. Like many things in this game, though, the gun and its talent are absolutely situational. For some greater context, I did a side-by-side comparison of two different PDRs. We have the first bloom here, and then another PDR with replica stats. So you'll see that on one side we have Blossom Harvest, and then I tested both Optimist here. You can see a 1 mag of that into a named enemy did with purely body shots. And then here's a look at that same test with Blossom Harvest, but instead compared to measured. So pretty good, right? However, even if it does edge out those two talents there, you then have to think about something like Killer. That only procs once you've defeated a target, and it's at its best when there are lots of enemies nearby to get those consistent kills. Blossom Harvest on the first bloom is going to be at its best when there are high armored targets nearby, and if you don't have those, maybe it's not going to shine as much. Also, like we discussed back when we were looking at the weapon, it is a PDR, and so by base, something like the Lexington, for example, has a huge advantage of just being a better base archetype of weapon. It has an extra mod slot, better rate of fire. So I will say, like with many things both in the Division 2 and just life, the truth is likely somewhere in the middle. If you see people out there saying that this weapon is absolute trash, they're wrong. But also if you see someone saying that this is the best new weapon in any and all content in the game, that's also wrong. It has its areas where it's going to shine, as well as areas where it will get outperformed. Ultimately, it is all about how you use it and how you build around it. Speaking of, this is the build that you've seen me using in this gameplay, in case you were curious. Now, just to note, this is not really like the optimal solo player heroic build. I got kind of greedy and I wanted the extra rate of fire from Salvo, but also the benefit of the Exodus gloves. But something like this, not using the Striker chest piece, would likely be more recommended for general DPS with the Overdogs. Or you could also go down this route using both the Salvo and the Equalizer for some great AR buffs that do help mitigate the PDR's downsides. Well, there you have it, everybody. That is the breakdown and review of the new first Bloom assault rifle that arrived with the Cherry Blossom event. I really hope that you enjoyed. It has been fun for us to actually get an interesting, unique, and viable event weapon, which is not always the case. I will say I much prefer this style of item and reward compared to the purely gimmick ones. But yeah, at this point, I would love to get any and all thoughts that you have about this new event weapon. What do you think about the builds that I put together with it? What are some build ideas that you have been running with this thing? Whatever you've got, leave it down below. I'll be very curious to read through. That's going to do it for me today, though. Thank you all so much for coming by and watching. I will catch you back soon, but until then, RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go!
And